You notice it immediately. The shift in their voice when you say no, that flicker of something dark behind the smile when you set a boundary, the way they lean into your guilt like it's a weapon they've been sharpening for years. You tell yourself you're imagining it. You're being paranoid. They're your friend, your partner, your family. They wouldn't consciously hurt you, but here's what you're not seeing. They don't need to be conscious. They're hunting in your blind spots, the parts of you that you've never integrated, the aspects of your personality you've rejected, denied, buried so deep you forgot they existed. Carl Jung had a name for this territory, the shadow, and he discovered something most people refuse to face. Your shadow isn't just the darkness you hide from the world. It's the weakness manipulators exploit to control you. Your niceness, your guilt, your fear of conflict, your desperate need for approval, your empathy. These aren't virtues when they're unconscious. They're vulnerabilities. And tonight, we're going into the underworld of your psyche to understand exactly how manipulators weaponize your unintegrated shadow against you. This isn't about becoming cruel. It's about becoming conscious. Because once you see how your shadow betrays you, you can transform your greatest weakness into your most powerful defense. Welcome to the warfare of self-knowledge. Population, those brave enough to face what they've been running from. Carl Jung wrote something most people misunderstand completely. Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. Translation: what you don't own owns you. The parts of yourself you reject don't disappear. They don't dissolve into nothing. They go underground, into the shadow. And from that dark territory, they control you without your knowledge. Here's the mechanism most people never grasp. When you reject aspects of yourself, aggression, selfishness, cruelty, desire, you don't eliminate them. You just lose conscious access to them. They become autonomous, operating outside your awareness, making decisions for you. And here's where it gets dangerous. Manipulators don't need psychology degrees to exploit your shadow. They don't need to have read Jung. They just need to feel where you're unconscious, where you're rigid, where you're predictable, because your unintegrated shadow creates patterns, automated responses, buttons that get pushed the same way every time. And manipulators? They're master button pushers, not because they're evil geniuses, because you've given them a control panel you can't even see. Jung discovered that the shadow isn't just personal darkness, it's potential. Raw, unprocessed, psychological material that could become strength. But when it remains unconscious, it becomes your kryptonite. Your niceness becomes people-pleasing paralysis. Your empathy becomes emotional quicksand. Your desire for harmony becomes conflict avoidance that destroys you slowly. 5 specific weaknesses. 5 shadow territories. 5 ways manipulators gain access to your psyche and drain you dry. Let me show you the battlefield. You feel it in your chest when they ask for something. That immediate pressure to say yes, even when everything in you is screaming no. You smile, you agree, you accommodate. And you tell yourself this is who you are, a good person. But Jung would ask a different question. Whose definition of good are you performing? Because here's what nobody tells you about niceness. It's not a virtue when it's compulsive. When you can't access no without catastrophic anxiety, you're not kind, you're controlled. The manipulator spots this immediately. They don't see your niceness as generosity. They see it as access, a weakness in your perimeter. They test it first with small requests. Can you cover my shift? Can you lend me money? Can you listen to my problems for 3 hours? And you say yes. Because saying no feels like violence, like betrayal, like proof that you're not the good person you need to believe you are. But here's the shadow truth Jung would reveal. Your compulsive niceness isn't about them, it's about you. Specifically, the part of you that's terrified of your own aggression, your own selfishness, your own capacity to prioritize yourself over others. You rejected that part, buried it, called it toxic, and now it controls you from the shadows by making no impossible. The manipulator understands this without knowing they understand it. They escalate, bigger requests, more emotional weight, more guilt when you hesitate, and you cave every time. Not because you're generous, because you're enslaved to an identity you can't risk losing. The antidote isn't cruelty, it's integration. Meeting the part of you that's allowed to be selfish, that's permitted to prioritize your needs, that doesn't collapse into shame when choosing yourself over someone else's comfort. Jung called this process individuation. I call it survival, because as long as your niceness is unconscious, it's a weapon someone else is wielding against you. They know exactly where your guilt lives. In that dark corner where you keep all the ways you think you've failed. As a partner, as a child, as a friend, as a person. The manipulator doesn't need to dig for it. You've already dug the grave. They just need to point at it. After everything I've done for you, I would never treat someone the way you're treating me. You're being so selfish right now. And immediately, the ground opens beneath you. Because your guilt isn't rational. It's archetypal, ancient, connected to something Jung called the collective unconscious. This deep, inherited sense that you owe something just for existing, for taking up space, for having needs, for being imperfect. The shadow aspect here is what you won't face. You believe, fundamentally, that you're bad, not sometimes wrong, not occasionally mistaken, bad at your core, and you spend your entire life trying to disprove it through good behavior, through sacrifice, through absorbing other people's pain and calling it love. The manipulator activates this guilt like a trained reflex. They don't even need to be strategic. They just need to imply you've hurt them, disappointed them, failed them, and you'll twist yourself into apology, into compensation, into proving you're not the bad person your shadow keeps whispering you are. But here's what Jung understood about guilt. It's only useful when it's conscious, when you can examine it, question it, determine if it's legitimate or if it's just old programming from childhood wounds. Unconscious guilt is a prison. You're serving a sentence for crimes you didn't commit. And the manipulator is both your judge and your jailer. The integration process here is brutal. It requires facing the possibility that you're not always the problem, that sometimes people lie. Sometimes they project. Sometimes they're the ones behaving badly and using your guilt to avoid accountability. This doesn't mean you're never wrong. It means you need to discern when you're wrong instead of assuming you always are. Jung would say, guilt is only transformative when it leads to change. Otherwise, it's just psychological flagellation. Stop whipping yourself. Start seeing. The room temperature drops when tension enters. You feel it in your nervous system immediately. That visceral, almost violent need to fix it, to smooth it over, to return to harmony at any cost. Even if the cost is your truth. Even if the cost is your dignity. Even if the cost is you. This is your fear of conflict speaking, and manipulators hear it like a dog whistle. Jung understood that conflict avoidance isn't about peace, it's about terror. Specifically, terror of what might emerge if you engage. Your anger, your disappointment, your rage at being diminished. The parts of you that aren't nice, that don't accommodate, that might actually destroy the relationship if given voice. So, you silence them, bury them, and call it choosing your battles. But you're not choosing, you're surrendering. The manipulator exploits this by making themselves volatile, unpredictable. One wrong word and they explode. They withdraw, they punish. So you learn to walk on eggshells, to monitor their mood, to adjust your truth based on what they can handle. This isn't relationship. This is hostage negotiation. And you're negotiating with your own shadow. The part that would rather betray yourself than risk the chaos of confrontation. Jung wrote, "Where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, love is lacking." Your fear of conflict is actually fear of your own power. The power to say, "This isn't acceptable." The power to hold boundaries even when someone's hurt by them. The power to let relationships end rather than continue in toxicity. Integration here means becoming comfortable with discomfort, with raised voices, with someone being upset with you, with the possibility that speaking your truth might cost you the relationship. Because here's the shadow's secret. A relationship you can only keep by silencing yourself isn't a relationship. It's a cage. And the manipulator is holding the key you're too afraid to take. Watch what happens inside you when someone withdraws their approval. That immediate panic, that desperate need to fix it, to explain, to perform, to win them back. Not because you particularly value their opinion, but because their disapproval threatens your existence. Jung called this the persona crisis. When your sense of self is built entirely on external validation, losing that validation feels like death. And manipulators know this. They spot it in your eyes. In how quickly you apologize, in how hard you try to be liked. They see someone whose self-worth is negotiable, someone who needs their approval more than they need their self-respect. And they use it, withholding praise, offering love conditionally, making you earn what should be freely given. The shadow element here is what you won't admit. You don't actually know who you are without someone else's validation. Your identity is a reflection of what others think, what others need, what others approve of. You're not living your life, you're performing it. For an audience that changes its standards whenever it benefits them. The manipulator becomes your mirror, showing you only what keeps you compliant, hungry, reaching for scraps of approval like they're oxygen. Jung's integration process here is ruthless. It requires asking, who am I when no one's watching, when no one's approving, when no one gives a damn what I do? Most people can't answer that question because they've never asked it. They've been too busy being who others need them to be. But here's the liberation. The moment you stop needing their approval is the moment they lose all power over you. Not because you become cruel, because you become sovereign. Your worth becomes internal, non-negotiable, not up for debate based on someone else's mood. The manipulator senses this shift immediately, and they escalate. Try harder to win you back, to make you doubt, to remind you of who you were when you still needed them. Don't go back. Your need for approval is the collar they use to walk you. Take it off. You feel their pain before they speak it, in the tension of their shoulders, in the edge in their voice, In the energy that shifts when they enter the room, your empathy is a gift until it becomes a curse, until you start absorbing emotions that aren't yours, carrying burdens you didn't create, drowning in someone else's ocean while they watch from the shore. Jung understood that empathy, when unconscious, becomes dangerous, not to others, to you, because you lose the boundary between self and other, between compassion and codependence, between feeling with someone and becoming their emotional landfill. The manipulator spots your empathy like a shark smells blood. They don't see someone who cares, they see someone who can be loaded with their anxiety, their depression, their unprocessed trauma, their refusal to take responsibility for their own emotional regulation. So they leak, constantly. Their pain becomes your emergency. Their crisis becomes your mission. Their dysfunction becomes your project, and you mistake this for connection, for depth, for love. But it's not love, it's vampirism. The shadow truth you won't face. Your empathy isn't just about caring for others, it's about avoiding yourself. As long as you're focused on their pain, you don't have to feel your own. As long as you're fixing them, you don't have to face what's broken in you. As long as you're indispensable to their survival, you have purpose. But Jung would ask, at what cost? Your energy depleted, your boundaries dissolved, your own needs perpetually ignored. Integration here requires something most empaths find horrifying: discernment. The ability to feel someone's pain without making it your responsibility, to witness their struggle without drowning in it, to offer compassion without absorbing. This feels like cruelty to the unconscious empath, like abandonment, like proof that you're not the caring person you need to believe you are. But it's not cruelty. It's self-preservation. It's the difference between helping someone out of the water and jumping in to drown with them. The manipulator will call you cold when you establish this boundary. Selfish. Heartless. They'll accuse you of not caring, of changing, of abandoning them in their time of need. Let them. Because your empathy, when weaponized by someone else's refusal to grow, isn't a gift. It's a trap, and the only way out is through integration. Now comes the transformation, the part where your weakness becomes your weapon. Jung's concept of shadow integration isn't about eliminating these qualities. It's about bringing them into consciousness, making them tools instead of vulnerabilities. Your niceness becomes discernment. You're still kind, but strategically to people who reciprocate, who respect boundaries, who don't weaponize your generosity against you. Your guilt becomes accountability. You take responsibility for actual wrongs, but you no longer accept blame for other people's projections. Their discomfort with your growth, their inability to regulate their own emotions, your fear of conflict becomes strategic engagement. You still choose your battles, but you no longer avoid necessary confrontation. You speak truth even when your voice shakes. You hold boundaries even when someone's hurt by them. Your need for approval becomes self-validation. You still appreciate recognition, but your worth isn't negotiable based on someone else's opinion. You become the authority on your own value. Your empathy becomes compassionate detachment. You feel deeply, but you don't drown. You witness pain without absorbing it. You offer support without becoming someone's emotional life raft. This is shadow work. Not pretty. Not comfortable. Not the spiritual bypassing nonsense sold as healing. It's the brutal process of meeting every part of yourself you've rejected and teaching it to work for you instead of against you. Jung wrote, The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality. Translation: you can't integrate your shadow without facing the parts of you that aren't nice, that are selfish, aggressive, self-protective, willing to prioritize your survival over someone else's comfort. The manipulator's power dissolves when you integrate these qualities, not because you become cruel, because you become conscious. You see the game. You recognize the patterns. You refuse to play. And most importantly, you stop believing that setting boundaries makes you the bad person your shadow was always whispering you were. This is the revolution, not against them, against the unconscious parts of yourself that have been betraying you for years. You're going to walk back into those spaces that used to drain you, the relationships, the family dynamics, the workplaces built on exploitation disguised as loyalty, and you're going to be different. Not because you're trying to prove something, because you've integrated what you spent a lifetime running from. They'll test you immediately, try to activate your old patterns, push your old buttons, resurrect your old guilt. But something will be different this time. You'll feel the pull, the familiar pressure to accommodate, to shrink, to apologize for existing fully. And you'll smile. Not a performed smile, a recognition that their discomfort with your boundaries isn't your emergency anymore. Some will escalate, accuse you of changing, of becoming cold, of not being the person they could control anymore. Let them, because your shadow, once integrated, becomes impenetrable, not through aggression, through consciousness. You've met every part of yourself they tried to weaponize against you. Your niceness, your guilt, your fear of conflict, your need for approval, your empathy. And you've transformed them from vulnerabilities into sovereignty. This is what Jung meant by individuation, becoming whole, not perfect, not without darkness, but conscious of it, in control of it. No longer enslaved by the rejected parts of yourself. The manipulators in your life will sense this shift immediately, and they'll have two options: respect your boundaries or remove themselves. Either way, you win, because your worth is no longer negotiable. Your shadow is no longer a weapon someone else can wield. It's yours, integrated, powerful, transformed. The assignment. Tomorrow, notice the moment someone tries to activate your old patterns, the guilt trip, the boundary test, the emotional manipulation. And instead of automatically responding from your shadow, pause. Feel the pull to people please, to absorb their discomfort, to sacrifice yourself for their comfort, then choose differently. Not dramatically, just consciously. A simple no without explanation, a boundary held without apology, a truth spoken even though they might not like it. This is shadow integration in real time. One conscious choice at a time. Write in the comments, "My shadow is my sovereignty." Let's see who's ready to transform their greatest weakness into their most powerful defense. The revolution starts with you facing what you've been running from. Welcome to consciousness. Welcome to power. Welcome to yourself.